Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Tekken Talks. I'm thinking that maybe one of the ways we could do this show is on Saturdays, we kind of do a more general, theoretical slash news, kind of like sportsy discussion of Tekken. Anyone can feel free to listen in. And Saturday, maybe, we'll do like more of a tips and tricks episode, which is maybe going to be a bit shorter. I mean, Sunday, excuse me, Sunday. Do maybe a tips and tricks episode, which is going to be a bit shorter, just sharing some advice of what I've learned and hopefully some tips that can help you improve your Tekken game. Although I'm sure many people listening are far better than I am. But yeah, let's get right into it with the first topic. And what honestly I think is the easiest way to increase how many wins you're getting or just not only how many wins, but almost your enjoyment of the game if you're not loving it already. And that is just increasing your block punishment slash string punishment proficiency, right? You know, almost everyone that you ask agrees that movement and learning Korean backdash and just learning general principles of movement in Tekken is very important for leveling up and getting better at the game, especially going into tournament level of play. However, I think something overlooked is just how important block punishment proficiency actually is. It's on par, if not more important than movement. Basically, what movement buys you, especially early on, when your movement, if you do learn how to properly backdash and sidestep, it'll get you lots of whiff punishes, right? So you can pretty much go into a tournament set within the first 30 seconds of the match, you know if you have better movement than your opponent or not. And if you have better movement than your opponent, like especially significantly better, you can really just backdash all day, wait for a whiff, because if they don't have that great movement, then it's very likely that they'll be whiffing attacks. Just wait for a whiff punish, and you're good to go, and you're going to win that set likely. On the other hand, let's say you're working on movement and you're coming up against players who have better movement or as good a movement than you are, the biggest free the biggest source of free damage, and you would be shocked at how free this damage actually is in against so many opponents, is just block and string punishment. It is absurd how much of an advantage you can get if you're just punishing your opponent hard for these things. And granted, there's different levels of difficulty within this. So, I'm not saying go into practice mode. If you're a Kazuya player, I'm not saying go into practice mode right now and punish 13 frame hop kicks with 13 frame electrics, right? Nobody is saying that that is like necessary to greatly level up your game. But but going from punishing a minus 13 frame move with jabs or 112 or like Gigas 1-2 or anything when you did not know that that move was punishable previously will change the entire course of the match if your opponent's using that move a lot. For example, Law's down 2-3 is genuinely probably one of the top 5 moves in the game if your opponent doesn't know it's punishable at all. Law's down 2-3 is like Akuma's down 1-2 with no execution and does as much damage. And if your opponent's letting you get away with it, then it's safe on block. And these moves, like down 2-3, which is a very famous example of a launch punishable string that everyone pretty much learns to launch punish early on. There's so many moves like this against characters that you might not play as often. And really just going into practice mode and using YouTube as your guide. Go into YouTube, look up Fang block punishment, Harang block punishment, Chloe block punishment, or Chloe punishment guide. Go into practice mode, follow those guides with your characters, just so that it's in the back of your mind that these moves are punishable. And then when it comes game time, instead of not punishing any of these moves, you're gonna get something. Even if you don't remember what the frames were, just remember that it's punishable. You can worry about optimizing punishment later, right? If you're not at the point where you already know what most things are, what a lot of punishable things are, then just worry about getting a punish. Don't even worry about how big of a punish it is, unless we're talking about like launching a hell sweep, right? Don't while standing for hell sweeps, right? If you block a hell sweep, you can go make a cup of coffee, come back, finish the cup of coffee, and then launch it. Like that's how bad they are on blocks. So, do try and launch those, but the typical anything from -10 to -15, just know that it's punishable and get a punish and know your character's punishers, and you will be shocked at how much extra damage you're getting per round, especially at a beginner to high level slash intermediate level of play, on just how drastically easier rounds will feel because your opponent will give you so many opportunities with unsafe moves. If you play a Claudio, literally just wait. If you play a Claudio who, again, you feel like is just pressing hop all the time, just knowing that that's punishable will totally change the course of the whole match. Because not only are you getting so much more damage that's just free, right? The only cost of getting this damage is going to practice mode for a bit, which I get a lot of people don't want to do, but it'll completely change the game because not only are you going to get more damage, you're actually going to make your opponent think about throwing out these moves, right? That's one of the biggest advantages is not just the damage, but the fact that it opens up an entire mind game that isn't there if you don't know the move is punishable. If I don't know Kazumi's down forward 1-2 is punishable on block and I don't punish it, then that mix-up potential of whether or not you'll finish the string and how powerful that move is becomes so good that the Kazumi player has nothing to worry about. And once they have nothing to worry about and they have access to what becomes a broken move, then you're at a serious disadvantage in the match. And again, you'd really be surprised once you actually start punishing your opponent for all the strings and all the unsafe moves that they do, or not even all 80+%. Once you get to a decent clip of punishment, you'll almost feel like the opponent's not very good. Like you'll really see just the flaws or how their play style is actually unfolding. For example, in tournament, um, I've played many Ninas in tournament. I've come up against many Ninas in the East Coast area. I'm not going to name any names, but a couple of them, not all of them, I have have gotten destroyed by some of these Ninas. But once you low parry can opener, once you sidestep the two like really classic Nina strings, I forgot their notation, and once you duck the what is it, down forward 3-4, once you do all that, which offline is much easier than an offline, and once you duck like 4-4, your opponent will just be shocked a lot of the times. I've had experiences where I've been playing Anina, and once you start countering those moves, they resort to their fundamental Tekken skills, and it's clearly not quite what got them, to their level of skill in some cases, right? I'm not categorizing all Ninas. I'm just saying there are these opponents who clearly have not experienced an opponent who has really punished them hard for the strings and moves that they're doing. And once you do that, your win percentage will drastically shoot up until you get to a certain point. But if you're at a point where you're not really punishing a lot of things, and I mean get up kicks especially, go to practice mode and learn how to punish get up kicks. The amount of damage left on the table for not punishing get up kicks, and especially up until like, I guess a high level of play or intermediate level of play, is absurd. I mean, face down, feet away, mid get up kick is -14. It's -14. You can get a chunky punish no matter what character you are. Some characters, the standard get up kick, face up, feet towards, they need to do a slightly special punish because of pushback on block. But a lot of get up kicks are also launch punishable. Low get up kicks, there's so much damage there that's just for the taking. It's just free damage. Learning these things, learning this punishment proficiency is definitely time consuming. But just knowing, just the initial, go to YouTube, watch the punishment guide, and just learning what's punishable, I promise will take your game to like a next level, and you'll be getting so much more free damage, and then you can really just expose your opponents for relying on moves that other people let them get away with. The next topic, or tip, trick, I guess I want to touch on, has to do with respecting and learning from your opponent. A lot of the time, everyone knows what a download is, right? Everyone can see when spectating Tekken, when one opponent has a download on the other opponent, and it went from being kind of a close game to just being 3 rounds 0, 3 rounds 0, and just no competition, and everything's getting blocked, everything's getting sidestepped, everything's getting, outspaced. And that's kind of refers to a download because one player understands the mentality and what moves the opponent wants to use in which situations, through the information that they have gathered. And even for me, and like I know for a lot of people, this is like one of the hardest things in Tekken. I don't think this learning how to do this ever stops, right? I asked Nee, or no, I asked Arslan recently after Nee said this. Is the most important thing in winning a Tekken game really mind games? Is it really understanding your opponent? And Arslan was like, yeah, I agree with Nate. And I think that's true not only at, their level, which they're the only two people at that level pretty much, but I think that's true at any level. And kind of a trick, I guess, that I've been using to not download my opponent, but to get a read on my opponent in a more efficient way than just trying to observe what they're doing and being like, oh, I have to counter that. Oh, I see that. That's like what I have to counter. Okay, they're going to do this in this situation. I need to counter this. Counter, 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 counter. Instead of doing that, I've taken a different approach where I'm just going to fully respect my opponent in that I'm going to say, all right, they have something to teach me, right? I'm going to learn from their play style. So when I'm playing them, but I'm thinking, ooh, what are they doing that's really good? How am I going to learn from this? Because if they're doing something really bad, if you just assume they're doing bad things, then it pretty much turns into practice mode, right? If you assume that they're just mashing for no reason or flow charting for no reason, all right, then yes, if the skill gap's really big between you and your opponent, that's a very easy win, right? You can just block everything, punish everything, space out everything. It's fine. But if you're going up to an opponent who's similar in skill level or better than you, then just saying, oh, I just have to counter this. Oh, they're just abusing this. It might not be that obvious for one, and it might not be that simple because everything that they're doing may actually have a lot of intention behind it, right? You might be going up against an Alyssa who's just constantly, constantly, constantly using Power Crush and bringing out chainsaws and going crazy. And you're like, what? Why is she doing this? I know Power Crush is good, but it's not really safe. And then you realize you're not really punishing it, and then you punish it, and then they mix you up, and so on and so forth. And it's just not as simple as, oh, I just have to counter this, right? You really have to go another level of depth and learn why your opponent's doing this and what's the intention behind all these moves. So instead of just thinking, oh, I just got to counter this, I just got to counter this, give your opponent way too much respect, not in terms of play style, right? You don't have to respect them in terms of actually playing, but you have to respect them in terms of who's the mind behind the character. And once you respect that the person who's playing the other character has intention with all their moves, they are actively thinking during the match, then you just think, okay, let me learn from them. Okay, what are they doing that's working on me? Not let me just counter it, but let me also try and incorporate that into my game in this match. let me counter it with, their own strats and try and exploit that. For instance, I'm sure all of us have gone up against a Leroy, especially when he first came out, who, I mean, saying there was intent behind these moves is kind of hard because you're like, okay, they're just spamming orbital down 1+2, down 2-3, parry, forward 2-2, back 4, hell sweep, back 3, right? And it seems totally random. And yeah, maybe it was. But if you say, okay, well, what are they actually doing? Well, they're utilizing parry. Well, does my character have a parry? Yeah, they do. Is it as good as Leroy's? No. But are there situations where they're using back 4 and I can parry it instead of block or maybe duck and get mixed up with a mid? And my parry might also parry their down forward 1. Oh, yeah, there is. Well, maybe my parry is better than I thought it was. Let me start using my parry. Or maybe, oh, they're being really aggressive and they're using like their best moves and they're only using their best moves in this matchup and they're not trying to use any weird moves. They're just saying, all right, I'm going to be full on aggressive. You can't handle my defense or you can't handle my offense. Well, then say, okay, well, maybe you can't handle my offense and start using your best moves a lot, a lot, a lot. And once you get into your opponent's mindset in that way, not only is your play probably going to be better because you're likely going to mix up your playstyle more, but you'll notice that you're getting a read on your opponent as the match goes on. You're noticing, actually they are going to parry after this orbital because I did a jab into parry or something weird and it worked. And I've kind of gotten into their mindset. All right, they're going to do orbital parry and then they're gonna even parry again probably. But after this orbital that I block, I'm just gonna wait 1 second, visually see the parry and punish it, right? And note that you kind of arrive to this conclusion not because you observed the orbital and the parry in the first place, and you're like, okay, they're gonna do that. Which yes, that is a very good way of doing things, and especially when you get to higher levels, that is what you have to do, and you have to do more hard reads on your opponent. But in terms of just understanding your opponent initially, I found a much easier method is just trying to learn from them and just really respecting all the move choices and everything that they're doing so that you're like, now I see the reason behind this instead of, this person's just playing randomly. I can't handle this. You know, I just have to perfectly counter everything they're doing. Try and learn from them and try and actually get into their mindset instead of, it's not practice mode, right? You're in a real match, especially in a tournament. You don't have time to get frustrated because you feel like your opponent's playing randomly, right? So yeah, I hope this Tekken tips and tricks helped. I know it wasn't probably the highest quality of content. This is only my second podcast, so I'm sorry. And let me know if you have any feedback or if you want to hear about any other tips and tricks in next week's episode. Uh, you don't have to follow me or anything, but at least if you have any questions, at me on Twitter at capital I igloos. So it's igloos with a capital I underscore. Igloos underscore on Twitter. Thank you very much. And yeah, let's level up our Tekken game together. Don't stop learning. And until next time, have a great day.